So good morning, everyone. Apologies for the technical issues. Big apologies at our end. My name is Diana Gueorguieva. I'm the Manager of International Trade and Strategic Relationships, and I'm going to be your MC. We will be facilitating our webinar from 3 locations, Brisbane, Bundaberg, and Seoul. And the webinar is a combined effort of 4 entities: the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland, CCIQ, the Australian Chamber of Commerce in Korea, AustCham Korea, the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, Austrade, and our CCIQ member, the iconic Bundaberg Brewed drinks. And I would like to thank our partners, Austrade, AustCham Korea, and our member, Bundaberg Brewed drinks, for their commitment to make this webinar happen. I would also like to acknowledge that this webinar is funded by the Free Trade Agreement Market Entry Grant, and we would like to thank Austrade for their support. As a matter of fact, this is the last webinar of a series of market entry strategies webinars which had focused on Japan, Indonesia, and now Korea. If you wish to access the Japan and Korea webinars, please contact us after this webinar and we can facilitate this for you. And now let's get back to our special presenters and the agenda for today. Helen, Austrade's Trade and Investment Commissioner and Counsellor Commercial Seoul will be joining us today from Korea. Welcome, Helen. Rowan Petz, Executive Director, AustCham Korea, will also be joining us from Korea. Welcome, Rowan. And finally, John McLean, the CEO of the iconic Australian brand and very successful Queensland exporter, Bundaberg Brewed drinks, we also will be joining us today. Thank you, John, for allocating time in your busy schedule to be with us today. The agenda for today. After my brief introduction, Helen will provide us with the overview of a post-COVID Korea and the post-COVID opportunities in Korea. After that, John McLean, the CEO of Bundaberg Brewed drinks, will share with us his secret to his mind-blowing export successes to Korea and the part of the export strategy played to achieve these successes. And finally, our colleague Rowan Petz will make the closing remarks. Once we finish with the formal presentations, our presenters will be part of a panel, and this will be your opportunity to ask questions. You will be on mute during the presentations. However, you can type in your questions in the chat box on the side and we can answer at a later stage. As the time is limited, we will follow up with you after the webinar with whatever questions we're not able to answer during the webinar. All attendees will be receiving a follow-up email with the links to the presentations and the recording of today's sessions. Hopefully we can our marketing team can actually cut the technical issues in the beginning. And we also will send a short survey, which we're going to present to the FTA Market Entry Secretariat at Austrade as evaluation for our webinar today. So let's get started. It is my greatest pleasure to introduce our first presenter for today, Helen, Trade Commissioner and Counsellor Commercial Seoul, Austrade. Helen joined Austrade in October 2020. She commenced her posting in the Australian Embassy in Seoul as Trade and Investment Commissioner and Counsellor Commercial in January 2021. Prior to joining Austrade, Helen led the New South Wales State Government's Market Development and International Engagement Program for Korea and Japan. Helen was the onshore manager responsible for developing and maintaining $1 billion investment pipeline and key accounts portfolio in Australia. Her clients included Korean and Japanese corporates such as Samsung, Hyundai, POSCO, LG, Hitachi, Sumitomo Mitsui Financial Group, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and SoftBank Group. Helen is an active member of the Future Leaders Program, facilitated by the Australia-Korea Business Council and the Australia-Japan Business Cooperation Committee. She represents Australia in amateur and professional golf from 2000 to 2010. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you very much to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland and AustCham Korea for this opportunity to brief you on the latest F&B market opportunities and export strategy in Korea. I'm also very excited to be presenting alongside John McLean. Bundaberg is one of the most successful Australian premium F&B export cases in Korea, and I hope my presentation today will equip many more Queensland F&B businesses to explore Korea as your next export destination, and also to generate many more success cases like Bundaberg. Next slide, please. So firstly, Korea as a market. Next slide, please. Korea has a population of 51.6 million and is the 4th largest two-way trading partner for Australia. I often say it's twice the size of the Australian population, living on a landmass less than a quarter of the size of Queensland. Given the high population density and lots of people living in high-rise apartments with shops nearby, words of mouth spread very quickly. Fads and trends come in and out very quickly as well. This dynamic market is the 11th largest economy in the world, with GDP of $1.63 trillion and strengths in advanced manufacturing. Next slide, please. Korea's economic growth and prominence in the global marketplace has been and is being led by the country's large family-owned conglomerates known as chaebol groups. And these should be well-known household names to you, like Samsung, LG, Hyundai, Lotte, and so on. Many of these conglomerates have agribusiness, food and retail divisions. Many of our exporters supply to, and in fact, CJ and Lotte have presence in Queensland. So it's also worth noting that Korea is a net importer of food and agricultural products, and more than 70% of food consumed by Koreans come from overseas markets, including Australia. Next slide, please. Korea has the fastest aging population of the OECD markets in the world, and the number of single-person households are also increasing. It makes up a third of all households in Korea at this stage, and this is expected to increase to 40% by 2040. In saying that, Korea is also a market with sophisticated, tech-savvy consumers across all age groups. Korea has the highest smartphone penetration in the world at 95%, and consumers are very quick to check product information, health benefits, biosecurity information online, and constantly follow new and hip trends. Next slide, please. Next 2 slides, please, actually. We've seen a significant growth of Australian export volumes across various agricultural and food product categories since CAFTA came into force in 2014. Next slide, please. Major Australian exports to Korea are beef, sugar, wheat, malting barley, oilseed, corn, potatoes, table grapes, mangoes, cherries, wine, dairy products, and nuts, including macadamia. Under CAFTA, beef exports to Korea have grown by 76%, citrus fruit exports by 1,853%, cheese and curd by 88%, fresh potatoes by just a small 27,575%, fresh sheep meat by 278%, and bottled wine by 140%. Pre-COVID, majority of these were supplied to the food service sector. However, due to COVID, we've seen some exporters pivot into packaged foods using the same ingredients in smaller portions and volumes. Korea's demand for imported food and agricultural products is expected to remain strong post-COVID. Next slide, please. Tariff elimination under CAFTA will help your price competitiveness and market access in Korea. The 8th round of CAFTA tariff cuts came into effect on 1st of January this year. This means beef tariff has been reduced to 18.6% and safeguard increased to 174,087 tonnes. Lamb tariff reduced to 4.5%. Duty-free quota for malt barley increased to 11,487 tonnes, and out-of-quota tariff reduced to 239.4%. There's no tariff on bottled wine, macadamia, rock lobster, cotton, and wool. As for infant formula, tariff rate quota of 578 tonnes apply in 2021, and this is not limited to milk powder. We're very much looking forward to having the tariff eliminated for lamb, lentil, red beans, chickpeas, processed butter, mangoes, peaches, plum, and a few other products by 2023. Next 2 slides, please. I want to start this section with a quick COVID update in Korea. Korea is currently riding out its 3rd wave with level 2 restrictions, which means there's no social gathering of more than 4 people except for immediate family members. Shops, cafes and restaurants have to close at 10 p.m. as opposed to running into early hours in the morning. Masks are still mandatory in public areas, including shops, restaurants and public transport. But there's never been a full lockdown in Korea, even with the current confirmed daily cases hovering around 500. In terms of economic recovery, the OECD is projecting a 3.3% growth in Korea's real GDP figures, and this is largely due to the Korean government securing 56 million doses of various COVID vaccines and commencing the rollout. So what are the COVID-related changes in consumer behaviours? More single and or older consumers are opting to eat at home, looking for convenient, time-saving homemade meals, and preferring to have food delivered rather than eating out. Consumers are moving from physical bricks and mortar stores to online channels. And as such, F&B companies are focusing their efforts on reaching their consumers through an expanded online presence and increasing their healthy home meal replacement and frozen meal ranges. Korea has an amazing freight and logistics and delivery system set up. Most people do their grocery shopping online on Coupang, Gmarket, Market Curly, and so on. And goods are delivered and ready at your door by 6 a.m. the next morning. What is interesting is that the new online consumers are predominantly in the 40 to 60 age bracket. The older population in Korea are being very agile and adapting to using various technologies and platforms. Consumers in their 20s and 30s are starting to show more interest in live commerce home shopping channels to purchase goods, and perhaps this is them preferring a more interactive way of online and live shopping. We're also seeing a growing demand for fresh produce, such as table grapes, oranges, mangoes, cherries, and as the price point lowers due to improved market access and better positioning in the Korean consumers' minds. Products with strong branding narrative and provenance sit very well with Korean consumers, and there's a continuing demand for frozen and confectionery goods from Australia. For new exporters, particularly with grocery products, I recommend starting with single ingredient products first for ease of registration and for quick turnaround in shipping and payment. Products with packaging that is artistic, Instagrammable, and grabs people's attention are selling well. Very briefly on packaging, if you're interested in cross-border e-commerce opportunities, please ensure you invest in substantive protective packaging for your products to make sure they don't break or go off along the way. Next slide, please. There are some challenges to overcome when entering the Korean market, and this is where I believe Bundaberg has done really well in addressing and carving out a market segment. There's a strong competition from both domestic and other international suppliers, driven by lower price points and focused marketing efforts to get visibility in a very crowded market. Localized taste and flavor is another barrier sometimes. I was talking to an ex-PepsiCo rep in Korea, and they were saying that even the crispiness or saltiness of potato chips differs a lot here. Market research, sampling, adjusting ingredients, proportion, or packaging may be necessary to catch the attention of Korean consumers. Korean importers are also very conservative and tend to stick with suppliers they have dealt with before and know how to do business with, so there might be a lot of work to be done there. Longer decision-making time is expected when you're dealing with the larger Korean conglomerates, as the new purchasing decisions need to be cleared at the top of the corporate hierarchy. And the bigger the organization, the higher the top of the hierarchy is. Excuse me. Austrade Seoul is doing what we can to connect with these top-level decision makers and to familiarize them with the Australian brand, our capabilities and our business reputation. Biosecurity issues in Australia, such as avian influenza and fruit fly breakouts, can get in the way as interrupted market access. Next 2 slides, please. Despite these challenges, what can you do to be successful in Korea? Finding the right business partner is absolutely critical. Make sure you undertake due diligence, get to know the organisation and the individual contact points. As I said before, the bigger the company, the more hierarchical decision-making process. So you have to account for this in your timeline when dealing with the bigger end of the town. And this leads to my next point. Pursue relationships in Korea with patience. Be responsive on email and phone and other means of communication. Koreans often use an app called Kakao Talk, and it's not unusual to have business discussions on this Korean version of WhatsApp. Be willing to negotiate your price points and product design to suit the Korean market and the importer distributor's marketing and promotional needs. And of course, Korea is a different market to China and Japan, so you need to have a dedicated, specialized promotion and marketing efforts, preferably in the Korean language. Next slide, please. So how can Austrade help? Of course, Austrade can provide assistance and leverage our network to ensure your success in Korea. I might use this opportunity to tell you about our new digital platform, which was recently launched and has something useful for exporters in various stages. Austrade has simplified processes to make global growth easier, less risky, and more in step with your changing needs. And Austrade Export Services, that is export.business.gov.au, it gives more businesses access to our knowledge and expertise through a single digital door. If you're exploring possibilities in various markets, narrowing down to your first export market, diversifying into different markets, or even if you would just like to stay ahead, understand laws and regulations specific to your product, export.business.gov.au should give you access to a wealth of resources useful for all these occasions. And Austrade Seoul's market intelligence is part of this suite of information. Austrade as an organisation is focusing our efforts in one-to-one, one-to-few and one-to-many services for expanding exporters at this stage, and I'm sure many of you would already be part of this program. If you're not, and if you'd like to find out more, please submit an export inquiry form via Austrade website, and we'll follow up with you shortly. Next slide, please. That brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions later and happy for you to send Korea market-specific inquiries to our general inbox, and that is seoul@austrade.gov.au. And I might hand it back to Diana at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for the comprehensive insights of the post-COVID Korea, for the opportunities presented for the food and the agribusiness sectors. I would like to revert to the slides of your presentation referring to Korea-Australia Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA, where you have mentioned the tariff wins for Australian exporters, and to highlight commodity exporters, tariff reductions do not come automatically. For your Korean importer to benefit from the reduced tariff rates of the FTA, CAFTA certificates of origin is required and can be obtained from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland. Once you have your shipping documents ready for your shipments to Korea, please contact my team at exportdocs@cciq.com.au and they will organize your CAFTA certificate of origin for you. When it comes to the market access and the strategy part of the conversation today, prepare now and to be able to reap the benefits of CAFTA at a later stage. And Helen and her team are in Korea to assist you all the way in this market. Knowing what the opportunities are is very important, and that's what Helen can help you with. Also, it's very important to know how to benefit from these opportunities, and you need to know what strategies to be able to use to enter the market, which are specific to your product and to your business. And with this, this is what we're going to discuss with our next presenter. It is my greatest pleasure to introduce to you John McLean. John is the CEO of Bundaberg Brewed drinks, an iconic Australian brand, and home to household favorite Bundaberg ginger beer. John has the fourth-generation family business and is son-in-law of the company founder Cliff Fleming. Having more than 25 years experience in the Bundaberg Brewed drinks, John took over as a CEO in 2007. His mission is to continue to grow the business internationally whilst maintaining strong entrenched family values. Bundaberg Brewed Drinks has gone through an extraordinary transformation under John's leadership. His brews are now available in over 60 countries through distribution agreements with the likes of PepsiCo and Costco in the USA, Carlsberg in Germany, and AG Bar in the UK. Since 2016, Bundaberg Brewed Drinks has been supplying the Korean market through their distribution partner, BNF, and Bundaberg Drinks can be found as north as the demilitarized zone bordering North Korea and as far as south as holiday destination Jeju Island. Today, the family-owned regional business employs over 230 people across Australia, New Zealand, America, and the United Kingdom, all working together to sell over 160 million bottles annually. Welcome, John. John, thank you for joining us today to share your knowledge and experience in relation to exporting to Korea. The export achievements of Bundaberg Brewed Drinks are truly remarkable, with export operations to over 60 countries. Before we begin discussing how you have achieved your mind-blowing export successes, would you please share with us the background of Bundaberg Drinks, where it all started and how the company is positioned now?
Thank you very much, Diana. Bundaberg Brewed Drinks is a proud family business based in Bundaberg in regional Queensland. We've been going in this town since 1968 in our family. We do one thing and we do it very, very well. We take real ingredients and all we do is add time. We add time in the brewing process to make the product that goes into our iconic stubby one of the best beverages in the world. The real ingredients start with growing ginger ourselves, processing ginger, and then transforming it into a world-class ginger beer. We do exactly the same for all of our fruit beverages, which we then sell around the country and around the world. Time for us is the most important ingredient in the bottle. That enables us to share our story and to continue to grow our success around the world. Bundaberg Brewed Drinks would not be where we are today without the people that have built it to where we are. Slide, thanks. For us, international success is really an overnight success. It's an overnight for the last 53 years. It's built on people, and as you can see from the slide, our team make up Bundaberg Brewed Drinks. Every year we bring everyone together to have a family dinner. That family dinner is very important because it helps us to build our values, and our values then get into our product, and that helps us with our international success. Our partner selection is something that we do not enter into very quickly. On the right-hand side of the slide are two of our star employees or partners in South Korea, and they're part of BNF. Bundaberg Brewed Drinks make sure that we think about our international business before we go into it. A really good example of how business can be different between countries is that in Australia, ginger beer is our largest market. In South Korea, pink grapefruit is the largest product there, and it accounts for 70% of the turnover there, whereas in Australia, pink grapefruit is only 3% of our turnover. When we think about our international business, it has to, and work with our partners, they have to reflect our values. And our values are very important. They underpin everything that we do. Some of the values that we think are very, very important is working as a team, because in Bundaberg Brewed Drinks, we can't do it all ourselves. Our family is too small and we need people to assist us, and we work well together. And we also have to learn how to innovate and grow to meet our customers' needs and our consumers' needs. And I think that's demonstrated very well in South Korea. But the most important thing with international business is the partner success or partner selection. In South Korea, we didn't enter into it very quickly. Daniel Kim and into BNF, we took our time. We made sure that they were well established. They had the right networks in the food and beverage channels, and they were the attributes that we're looking for in every market. Once the partner in market embraces the brand, it's easy for us to be successful. And into BNF, live, breathe, and ooze Bundaberg every single day. Next slide, thanks. That overnight success has now grown to being over 60 countries. Our ambition is not to be the Olympic Games of the world. Our ambition is not to have every country represented, but our ambition is to go into select markets and to go deeper and broader. And that's what we've done there. It's interesting to note that globally, soft drink consumption has declined as consumer tastes and preferences have changed. However, Bundaberg, we have found ourselves in a unique and a very fortunate position of growth. Whilst the mainstream soft drinks are declining, the appetite for premium adult soft drinks has grown. And we can see this certainly in the discerning Korean consumer who prefers high quality and unique product over mass markets. When we were going in, we made a lot of decisions. And one of them in the decision to launch in Korea was made on extensive research, our due diligence, and market visits to make sure that we have the right partner, we have the right understandings, and that we can step forward and launch. And launch we did in December 2015. We launched small, but we can say today, we proudly can say that we are selling over 6 million bottles this year in the Korean market, and we are across all channels in the grocery scene. Next slide, thanks. One of the things we've learned as we've gone along is we've changed how we do things. Once upon a time, our export strategy was on the left-hand side. Stick our product in a container, close the doors, and hope beyond all expectation that it sells, and then wait for a call. We started doing international business in 1987, and we sold to New Zealand. It was the result of an accident. But that accident we've learned from, and from those humble beginnings, we've grown and become more mature. Our opportunistic or transactional approach to doing international business has changed dramatically. No longer are we an export business. Today, we are an internationally focused business. And that comes with the maturing of our business from a manufacturing business, which had an inconvenience of stock we had to sell, to a sales and marketing business where we think about the consumer at every step. And now our new international business model means working with our partners in our select markets, taking the time to understand what their needs are and what the consumer needs are, and then working out how we can best meet the needs of the consumer in the marketplace through the skills and the ability of our partner. In Into the BNF, we certainly have done that very well, and we have a joint business plan, we have a sales and marketing plan. We now have employees that are dedicated to working with it to make them successful. We have an international marketing manager based in Brisbane, and we have sales managers that are based in Bundaberg who work very closely with Into BNF. We also have employees in New Zealand, United States, and in Europe. We could once say that our international team was part of our sales team, which is in fact one person. Today we have a team of people all around the world, and we specifically focus on international. The other thing that we have done to make sure that our international strategy is not an export strategy is we have changed how we do our quality system. We now hold international accredited BRC standards with HACCP, whereas once upon a time we were an Australian focused ISO 9001. Next slide, thank you. Last year we had our Korean partners come out to us, and we were a little bit concerned about COVID. The Korean team made sure they wore shirts with Korean written all over them, so they didn't get confused with Chinese people. We thought that when we diversified away from Australia that was the end of our challenges, but COVID certainly has given us many, many challenges we did not anticipate. All of our Australian international markets have been affected by COVID. Internationally, the greatest effect is in sales to the on-trade area, such as hotels, restaurants, and bars, and importantly, our supply chain. Like in Australia, the on-trade has being closed down during COVID lockdowns or restricted. The restrictions have been, as Helen alluded to, in trading hours or methodologies of serving customers in the premise. That's resulted in less traffic or less foot traffic in these premises. Bundaberg is no different to any other international exporter when it comes to supply chain challenges. Our supply chain has been dramatically affected during COVID with either congestion at ports, mandatory quarantining of staffs, blank sailings, or challenges trying to get containers. This has unfortunately meant that sometimes scheduled shipments have arrived more than 1 month after they were originally scheduled. But our teams in all those international markets have been confined to the local area, and we have not been able to travel or meet with our partners. So we've had to adopt a new methodology, and we've embraced social media, digital technologies such as Zoom. And we've conducted all of our meetings online, which can sometimes be tough, especially when English is their second language. But fortunately, our business has seen an upside during COVID, and our strategy, we have developed strategies to capitalize this. A great example of how we've been able to adapt during COVID is the rise of e-trade, e-commerce strategy, and making sure that we've got that channel really progressing. For example, people can now buy our product. In China, you can get ginger beer delivered to your door in 30 minutes. In Korea, we are using the platforms as expressed before, which are Market Curly or Nature's Basket. We've also been adapting our marketing strategy, and you can see on the right-hand side, we've adapted our marketing strategy about how to make cocktails at home, so people can continue to learn about our brand and enjoy a everyday indulgence. We have a healthy spread of sales across many marketplaces and channels, so that at the present stage, COVID is not affecting us overly. Our temporary diversion from on-premise to e-commerce has worked very, very well, and we are working with the #1 e-commerce platform, Coupang, and I've just received a notification that we're 500% up in February and March on Coupang. We've also been investing in advertising platforms for product recommendations, keyword searches, VIP promotions, and banner advertising. One of the things that I can't quite get my head around, but K-pop stars, actors, and celebrities are now posting with my product in South Korea. I'm not the demographic, so I have not seen the K-pop stars doing it online myself, but my staff have certainly given us very many examples. The other thing that we've been doing is sampling, and sampling is very, very important and a critical part to building brand and trial. And we've certainly been building our sampling campaign around and working with COVID rules. And whilst we haven't been able to do sampling at the store, we've been able to do sampling by giving people product. Next slide, thank you. I think most importantly, international success has been based around people, product, and partners. One of the other successes that really helped us in South Korea is CAFTA. When CAFTA came in place in 2014, our tariff at that stage was 8%. As of today, after 7 stages of reduction, we have no import tariff. This has now enabled our partner and ourselves to invest in more areas like marketing and innovation. One of the things that we did with our partner is set realistic goals right at the very beginning. We had our success slowly on our brand name and success in Australia, and we were able to work with our partners in South Korea to make sure that they were able to bring our brand into their marketplace. I would suggest to anyone looking to enter an international business, carefully think about your entry strategy. Bundaberg and Inter BNF have built a premium brand where we work closely with the top 3 retailers, Home Plus, Emart, and Lotte, as well as hypermarkets like Costco and other supermarkets. Our product is now sold in specialty stores like Lotte, the Galleria, and Hyundai, but we've also developed a strong on-premise customer base in hotels, bars, and restaurants. E-commerce is important. So what I'm trying to say is don't build your strategy just around one pillar. Carefully think about your marketing strategy. What works so that you can be successful? For us, it's building trial and awareness. And lastly, our product we have to make sure is right. And whilst we think that our product might be right, we have to look at our international food legislation and labelling requirements. What might be legal in Australia is not necessarily legal in Korea. What might be legal in one country won't be legal in another. So we've had to do very timely and costly reformulations to meet new market regulations. We are now presently working on a one world formulation so that we can reduce the complexity in our brewery. The other challenge is labelling. I'm very good at reading English, but very bad at reading any other language. A great example of this is it took us 3 years to develop Chinese labels. The nuances in the Chinese language are very timely, very costly, but we persevered and in the end we were successful. So if I could sum up and talk about when you want to enter a market, make sure that you take your time and be very selective in your market entry. We have taken our time, worked very strongly with InterBNF, with Mr. Kim and their team to make sure that they are successful. And as a result of that, we are doing very well in South Korea. Thank you very much.
John, thank you for your time today and for sharing with us your experience. It is a remarkable export journey. It is really a privilege. It's a real privilege for us to hear your story. And thank you very much for sharing your post-COVID experiences, the impact on your business and the strategies implemented. Your experience can help many exporters in Queensland and Australia-wide to know how to be flexible about their business and how to deal in challenging environments such as the post-COVID environment. So thank you very much for being with us today. And on behalf of my team at CCIQ, I would like to thank you for being our guest presenter and sharing your experiences with Australian exporters.
Thank you.
And with this, I would like to finish our formal presentations, and we will go to the next presentation, which is more like a closing remarks of our colleague Rowan Petz to make the closing remarks for the webinar today. Rowan Petz is the Executive Director at the Australian Chamber of Commerce in Korea. Rowan brings a wealth of diverse experience and knowledge into his role, having initially studied as a fraud investigator before moving into currency management sectors for 6 years. Rowan's passion for international trade and politics led him to a degree in international relations from La Trobe University, Melbourne. Having received the Endeavour Australia, Cheung Kong and the Victorian Government's Hammer Scholarships Awards, Rowan was granted the opportunity to study international relations and Korean language at Yonsei University in Seoul, South Korea. With a strong passion for wanting to further strengthen the Australian-Korean relationship, Rowan commenced work at the Chamber in 2016. Welcome, Rowan.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here today, and thank you for Helen and for John's presentation. It's a great insight to some successes into the Australia-Korea relationship. As Diana alluded to, my name's Rowan Petz, the Executive Director here at the Australian Chamber of Commerce located in Seoul. Just a little bit of background about AustCham. AustCham is a non-profit organisation representing roughly 260 members from across the region. Our aim and mission is really to foster and develop strong links between Australia and Korea and help diversify the relationship and work closely with the Australian and Korean government. As we've seen by today's presentations, Australia and Korea share a long and strategic history and is underpinned by the Korea-Australia Free Trade Agreement. Today's event is an important reminder that sometimes we underutilize not only CAFTA, but the relationship, and there's plenty of opportunities to be seized. Not only these opportunities are available for established businesses, but we do look forward to seeing a lot of emerging companies break into the Korean market. Continuing on from today's session, I'd like to really encourage our attendees with an interest in the bilateral relationship and who are looking to export into the Korean market, is to leverage these relationships and networks that have been established. And that includes what I like to call Team Australia, and work alongside CCIQ, Austrade, AustCham, and also the general Australian business community, such as the success stories that we see with Bundaberg. So I believe now we're going to be moving over to the Q&A session. I look forward to speaking to everyone soon. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Rowan, for your closing remarks, and thank you for working together on this first joint initiative, and I sincerely hope there'll be many others to come in the future. Now let's move to the Q&A session, which is part of our webinar today. There are a few questions which have been submitted to you. I will start with some, and if we run out of time, our team is going to follow up with the presenters and they will make sure that they will be answering all your questions. So let's get started. The first question is for Helen. Helen, in your experience as a trade commissioner in Korea, what would be the 3 key factors to export success in Korea?
Thanks, Diana, for the question. And you know, there's such a diverse product range and exporting capabilities in Queensland, and I think the 3 common success factors would be: number 1, finding the right local partner and distributor for your brand, for your product, and depending on the size of distribution channels, which on-premise, off-premise outlets you would like to access to. I think finding the local partner for Bundaberg, it was Inter-BNF, that is absolutely critical, and staying in contact with them to make sure you understand the changing import regulations and the market trends. Keep profiling your product among the importer distributors' vast global products portfolio. I think that would be number 1 success factor. Number 2, as John briefly mentioned, and I briefly touched on in my presentation as well, is dedicated marketing and promotional efforts and investment targeting the Korean market, Korean consumers in Korean language, in Korean search engines and Korean outlets. And that, of course, takes a lot of time and understanding the market in depth. So that would be the second most important success factor. And this is a bit of a half point, and it goes back to the first point I mentioned, responsiveness to importer and distributor inquiries on email, phone and Kakao Talk and other means of communication. That promptness, even if it's just to say that you have received the inquiry and that you're working on it, that make sure that that ensures that you are featuring at the top of the international portfolio, and that your importer distributor will feature your product in their market shelves and e-commerce channels.
Thank you, Helen. The second question is for Rowan. Rowan, when we talk about international trade, there is always a consideration for the cultural element. How important is understanding the culture when dealing with Korea, and why?
Thanks for the question. As Helen sort of alluded to in her presentation, doing business Korea has certain conservative elements in nature, and while Australia and Korea are similar in many ways, I believe that culture, language, and business practicality is probably the largest single barrier to conducting business in Korea, especially for any international companies. For this reason, I think it's crucial to understand the fundamentals of Korean business practices and have a true understanding of how Koreans think and operate in market. Korean culture is steeped in Confucianism, and that's a really important aspect to doing business. There's a strong emphasis on education, authority, and age, and these principles are very prevalent, more so in the larger conglomerates, but you can still find them, even in smaller businesses. Although we're seeing a change in how businesses operate over time, the principles continue to play an important role and underpin many customs in businesses today. And I think, you know, if you are looking to export into the Korean market, having this sort of knowledge and understanding will be the key to success.
Thank you, Rowan. The next question I'm going to address both to John and to Helen. John, we have already mentioned the importance of relationships in developing the Korean market. Are you able to provide me with an example on how a relationship was critical for export success or completing a deal in Korea?
Diana, yes, I think for us the critical success factor for signing up and going where we are in South Korea started before we even commenced with market research. We understood what the Korean market was about. We then found a tremendous partner, and that's when we really needed to start working together. And the one thing that's really important is time. Taking our time to make sure that we've got the ability to build a relationship between InterBNF and Bundaberg Brewed Drinks. That could be as simple as having WhatsApp chats where the team talk to each other continuously now. The next thing that was very important for making South Korea successful was to visit the market and get in market and, you know, to take a turn, to visit the Gemba. And we were there, and we've been and we've seen extensively throughout there. And then the last success factor is setting realistic goals in the beginning. If you don't have realistic goals to commence with, it does taint the entire process. So I think that was very important in making our relationship successful with InterBNF.
Thank you, John, for your comprehensive response. Helen, would you like to add something at your end, from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. I think relationship matters a lot in Korea in the initial market entry stage, but also your continued success in market long term. And so one case I wanted to share with you is of a wine exporter from a different state, but I think this logic applies to agri-food products and companies across the board. This company had been in market for 5 years, exporting their products through 5 different importers in Korea. Through COVID, their sales revenue stagnated, and they wanted to touch base with their importers to make sure they understood their market standing and whether their product offerings were in line with the latest market trends. And so they reached out to Austrade, and we, since they couldn't travel into market, we conducted an importer interview to understand the current status of those importer client relationships and where there was room for improvement. So we generated about 5 recommendations and next steps to renew that relationship, to understand, to help the importer understand the client's brand narrative and product focus clearly, so that they can replicate that marketing pitch to their distributors, and also to help the client understand the importer positioning and needs and marketing gaps. And so after the client actioned those recommendations, it actually resulted in the largest wine order that the company received from an overseas market during COVID. And this was all from that long-term commitment into the market and that renewed relationship with their existing importers.
Thank you, Helen. And our final question for today, we've got time. It is for John. John, if you could give one piece of advice about exporting to Korea, what it would be, but probably I should rephrase it. If you can give one piece of advice of what not to do when you're dealing in Korea to make sure that the deal succeeds, what that would be?
Diana, I can give a very concrete example. If you think that your quality is good enough in Australia to meet the Korean standards, I think you might be wrong. I can share with you a time when I was on a market tour with the InterBNF team, and we were observing consumers in action, and there was a young lady. She was studying my product intensely, She looked at it for nearly 20 minutes before putting down one bottle and buying a different bottle. For me, that was crazy and I couldn't understand. So I grabbed the bottle and I pounced on the poor lady. I think I scared her, being a very large Australian man, asking her to answer a question, which I assumed she would be able to do in English. But she explained to me that she put the bottle back because it was poor quality. And for us, we think we are a very high standard, high quality product. In the Korean market, you just need to look at how they present fruit and veggies, or how you go to the cereal aisle and look at the boxes. It is a different level of quality to what the Australian marketplace has. The lady told me very simply that it was poor quality. The label had a small tear in it. The inkjet code, if it's missing one dot, is poor quality. So our business has undertaken some Korean quality lessons. We've listened very carefully with our partners into BNF. And we've increased our quality standards for all markets, but specifically for Korea, so that we are successful. So my one piece of advice, if you think your quality is South Korean levels, I think you might need to look at South Korean quality and take some learnings.
Thank you, John. And with this, we will conclude our webinar today. Special thanks to our guest presenters, Helen O, Austrade, John McLean, Bundaberg Brewed Drinks, and Rowan from AustCham Korea. And special thanks to Austrade for funding the webinar via the FTME grant. And thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you in our next webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.